Dheeraj, the man, the legend, welcome to Stories in AI.
I'm humbled. Thank you, and I look forward to learning.
No, it's you're always so humble, and I'm so grateful you took the time to do this. And it's been I know we reconnected after so long, and you've been a little busy, I can imagine, right? Taking a company public, building it out, and then going in and building another huge, potentially category defining company again. So we want to talk about all of that. But as you know, this show is all about. We started off just as AI, but then kind of broadened it out into like technology, how it impacts humanity, and what we do as a way to be participants in that particular journey, right? And so we interview a lot of industry leaders who actually are putting technology to work, and folks like you who are actually revolutionizing the use of this technology to have this. So excited to have you here. I want to start off with, everybody knows your story, but one, and I don't want to go into the usual thing about like, hey, Dheeraj, tell me your story because you're a popular guy right now, right? But tell us something about your background that I know there's probably a lot of experiences, but something about your background you can look back and say that experience got me here, or it resonated so much it had a huge impact on where I am today.
One of the things that I talk about a lot is the influence and impact of just being an Apple user since 2007. Actually, even 2004, I would say, has had a huge impact on my ability to, um, I would say, invoke the word minimalism and invoke the word design and invoke the word delight, while you're conducting business or, building products or talking to people and being like what people expect a leader or manager to be. I think there's a lot to learn from that experience, and this is going back 15 years, a decade and a half now. Um, I would say uh, learning with Apple as they actually grew their product
Huh.
portfolio. And I mean, it was a clunky product in 2007, as you and I would remember,
Yes.
to basically seeing everything emerge, the App Store emerge, and the iPad come out, and how they cannibalize their own business of iPads with the bigger iPhones and things like that. And
Yeah.
um, to now looking at Mac, I mean, I'm a pretty you know I would say diehard Mac user as well. Um, and I think in all of this, just learning minimalism, simplification, what it means to really think about reducing friction, that has really shaped my overall career and overall thinking, even at home with children. I mean, talk about
Mhm.
three things and no more than three things, and maybe going back all the way to 1992 and 97, some decisions in my own life where I took some big risks and they panned out. And as they say, the biggest risk is not taking one. And in many ways, I think that's been a story of my life. So I would say, um, exploring the unthinkable and really learning to simplify and continue to evolve in that journey
That
are
is,
part of my experience.
that's so powerful. And in fact, for the record, in 2007, I wasn't using a Mac because I was a diehard Dell guy, right? So I was a Dell for 11 years, and I left only in 2016, and then I fell in love with the Mac, of course, after that, right? So, but no, it's such a beautiful thing, right? How little things in life in general, right, where you start seeing this thing and you start seeing association, and you use the word minimalism and simplification and stuff too. In a lot of ways, when I see you beyond your technologist background and how you are as a leader, and a lot of the writings you did, and how from my other friends in Nutanix who tell me and how you conduct business and how you treat people, there is so much of that. I would kind of call it that Zen calmness to it, and I want to actually explore that a little bit later with you on that, right? But it's fascinating how little things just add up and kind of gives you perspective, and then it kind of carries on with you as a bubble through your life, right? So, um, pretty awesome. Let me start off with asking you about how does Dheeraj Pandey see the world today, right? we have a lot of things going on. Just coming out of a pandemic, you started a new company, and I love that. We're gonna kill the PM post that recently you just where you it's the anti post that you did, right? About the role of the product manager. So, how does Dheeraj Pandey see the world today? Not just from a technology, but across what's happening around the world.
Yeah, it's a very profound question, and I think about this also from the point of our children. We have three of them, and we like, okay, what's the world that they're headed towards? And some things are very clear. With the advent of video and bandwidth and all that stuff, you'll start to see a lot of businesses, basically expand and use different parts of the world for many things beyond just offshoring and outsourcing and back office work. I think there's going to be front office work happening from all over the world. That's for
Yeah,
sure. Because the whole generation of people who are willing to actually align with your time zone, if that's what it takes to sell to you or to support you or demo to you or make you successful in customer success and so on. So I think that is one thing that is here to stay. And if anything, COVID taught us that. A lot of
yeah,
field reps were really doing the job like an inside salesperson would do and still go close large deals. So
yeah,
video is here to stay, and we got to make sure we don't overdo it. So there's going to be a good balance between the face to face and really coming and meeting people and building relationships versus doing a lot of transactional work on video and remote. I think globalization is at risk for sure. And again, this
mm,
is something that you would hear in Davos, but it actually affects all of us. I mean, I was reading this article yesterday about Taiwan and China. I'm like, wow. I just hope we don't see another sort of war-like situation emerge here, where all of a sudden the supply of semiconductor itself is going to be in question. And how do we all deal with it is going to be a big question mark there.
yeah,
We all know about commodities and things like that. So, we are in, I mean, it wouldn't be an understatement to say that there's some challenging times ahead.
yeah.
Interest rates are another question mark. And with that comes stock market and everything else. So I think given all of that, I do come back to the Zen thing you spoke about, which is, so what's in your control?
Mhm.
And you can only take care of that. So I personally focus on that, and I want the company to focus on things that's in our control, as opposed to try to surmise everything and think about how it's all looking not so happy. I mean, definitely things are not looking as happy, but at the same time, I feel like this idea that you can be more efficient in the business because of video is a calming force and a compensating force there as well.
That's interesting, and a couple of things on that note. So, video, globalization at risk and stuff. I also think that we probably, rightly so, but early enough defined globalization a little differently than what it is turning out to be, right? The first thing that you mentioned, with videos and with people and the access to the internet and connectivity across, there's a new meaning for globalization that's coming together, right? How do you collaborate at scale across different time zones and stuff? What probably changed was you don't need the powers to be actually to dictate the rules of doing that. I mean, that was the original definition of globalization, right? It was state control and stuff like that. So I think there is something there where it's at risk, but it's getting transformed as we do it. Now, I'm not going to cross over to the crypto territory right now yet, but there are some interesting parallels here where there's the old and the new ways that are having a tussle in the market, if
Yeah,
you will.
yeah, and I think it'll happen. I mean, even though crypto is going through its own winter, but I feel like the underlying blockchain and what you can do with the blockchain in a decentralized way, even for B2B companies, is up for grabs. Just like the internet of 2000, we thought that this was just a froth, and it wasn't to be. There were companies that persisted and they did well, and they became the e-commerce giants that we all go and transact with on a daily basis. And there were those that scoffed at the internet bubble burst. And I think Web3 is going through that. At the same time, I think there's a lot of incontrovertible things about Web3 that are worth really leveraging. And as a company, we're also learning and doing quite a bit. I mean, one of the things we did recently was we were getting um, so many friends and family to say, "Can I invest in DevRev?" And like, we can't take small checks. There's a cost of a lawyer and all this other stuff that adds up. And then in the last 6 months, said, you know what? Let's just go and make this a little bit more digital, where we don't have to have face-to-face meetings and lawyer fees and all sorts of signatures and paperwork and stuff like that. So we put that as a token on the blockchain. We're doing it in Ethereum, and we said we can now take $50,000 checks. So the whole thing is digital. It's only accredited investors. So there is a way of actually atomizing your relationship with some of these friends and family investors who want to come in early if that's what it takes. Which would not have been possible in the old world.
Mhm.
And I think that's just a tip of the spear in some sense. What you can do with PLG, we'll talk about product led growth as well. But the
Mhm.
idea that your user is your micro seller because of how big an advocate and champion they are. So how do you reward them? You probably need to reward them for the proof of work, and that work is really how they're spending time in your product and helping the community and answering questions and things of that nature. That can be codified through tokens as well. So there's something here which will probably also change the face of B2B in the coming 3 to 5 years, which people are beginning to laugh at and say, well, crypto is just untouchable. But I think the folks who are really going to touch it are the ones who will actually create some differentiation over time.
No, I'm as bullish as you are on that front too. Like, definitely, I think like you said, like B2B, all of the notions that we all grew up in when we were initially doing B2C. It's enterprise sales, top down, sell high, and customer success and stuff. All of that is now have the infrastructure in place with things like crypto, the blockchain and stuff, to really disrupt. So I think if you really squint hard enough, you'll see all of those individual infrastructure pieces floating together. And back to what you guys did at Nutanix is, how do you compose that to actually build solutions and solve problems, right? I think
Hmm.
it's pretty
Yeah, and
amazing.
there's one more thing about obviously we talk a lot about AI as a buzzword, and in many ways, I mean, as I follow this movement the last couple of years, everybody said it's going to be TensorFlow, and Google is going to go big after it, and so on. And one thing that looks very similar to the way IBM Watson, kind of went through this fate as well. When your machine is not accessible, even though it's a big machine sitting there, so Watson machines were only in IBM's data centers, and it was very difficult to access Watson. I think that's what happened to TensorFlow too. So that's why the reason why PyTorch has become so popular is because it's so accessible. It's
Yep.
so decentralized. The fact that I can run it on my laptop and build some models and test it, even while I'm disconnected, again goes back to this thing about access and decentralization that will affect the way people leverage machine learning and AI in the future as well.
No, that's so well said. And I think there is the paddles, or I mean, it is at every different level, right? I mean, it's the whole notion of like distrust of centralized organizations like governments and stuff like that, like all those things. And then you take a step below, it is basically about like, how do you collaborate and communicate, and you know well, with the access opportunity, you're now creating new models for it, all the way down to building technology, selling technology, and taking value out of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. So since you touched AI, let's go into AI a little bit, right, Dheeraj? And tell me about, like, where is AI today? What is solved, what is still being solved, what is worth solving? Just explore that for me.
Again, a very profound question, and I wish there was an easy answer, and not that I even fully understand it. Um, we have some really good experts that I learned from at DevRev too, who are deep into it, and so they are learning to figure out how to interface that with design,
Mm.
And even the crawl, walk, run of going from rule-based engine, which is prescriptive,
Yeah.
to something that is, a little bit more predictable, predictive,
Yeah.
which requires machine learning now to and models to come in. I think, there is this last 10 years of machine learning and AI, and the next 10 years, I feel like the next 10 years, it has to be more invisible, more like oxygen, where it's everywhere. Like, I don't see Google and Facebook talk about AI and ML as
Mhm.
much. I mean, obviously, they have a PR issue there, which is like, what are they doing with my data?
Yeah.
But in general, I think the best technologies, especially things like AI and ML, the more invisible they are, the better they are as well. And that's the
Segment.
challenge for a lot of us entrepreneurs, is to make sure that we weave it in. Like, we talk about, for example, customer support as a use case. Now, one of the big challenges there is an engineering challenge, which is search engine. How do you really make search extremely affordable? And not just syntactic search, but semantic search. And
Mm.
semantic search gets into the realm of machine learning, and it gets in the realm of
Um,
vector embeddings, and how do you really figure out the right dictionary on every tenant basis and so on. So there's a lot of engineering challenges with machine learning and AI, which most people underestimate, including data engineering and collection challenges, because that
yep.
means you have to interface with machines to do a lot of mundane work of collecting data before you can try to make ascribe meaning to it and really build models out of it. I think we are in the very early stages. It's like the way maybe the mobile technology and the cell phones were in 1995. I think
Mm.
one was able to prove that cellular technology is sustainable, possible, but to really make it work, it took 3G, and it took manufacturing in China, and it took so many other things to come together, and including a killer app like music to really, and email to sit on top of it, and YouTube to sit on top of it for things to really emerge.
No, it's you're so right. I think like I forgot it was Maxwell whoever said it. Any mature or in technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? And so AI, the future of AI is invisibility for sure, right? You have to weave it in. But I think you touched upon a few things, right? One is when I view the market in AI and like selling to organizations, helping them set up their environments, it's very it's interesting. There are two areas, two parts of the spectrum that are still largely unsolved, right? One is the data side of the spectrum, and that includes collecting data, storing data, putting in the format that you understand, not spending enough more too much calories in trying to get the data ready, so the value that you're going to get from AI or ML is actually completely out of whack. And then the other side is the actually three parts of the problem. One, the second part is the engineering problem, like you said, right? How do you do the interfacing of an algorithm in a Jupyter notebook is not an example of what it's going to run in production. I mean, that's not a good representation of what they're going to deal
Hmm.
with in
Hmm.
production, right?
Hmm.
So that whole engineering challenge, and I think it's more than just the ML ops buzzword that we hear about right now, right? ML ops will solve parts of it, but it's going to be a lot of people, processes, handoffs, the collaboration between different parties involved in building an AI or an automated decision system. And the last thing, I think we want a lot more innovation in the market too is the experience, right? How do you interface with an automated decision system or a semi-automated decision system? And back, it brings back to your original comment on like, the Apple is the simplicity, the whole notion of looking at minimalism and stuff like that. There is, I think there's a lot of opportunity still there because we haven't figured out the experience thing. I mean, like it's easy to actually give a recommendation, show you an evidence or an explainability, but a lot, what will you do when you don't want to show to the user that this is
Hmm.
actually AI,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's
You're
invisible.
right. Yeah, in fact, if anything, I feel like AI and design are two sides of the same coin. The best design systems will have recommendations coming in, machine speaking back,
Yeah.
but they'll also be humble. I mean, there was a really good article in the journal maybe 4 or 5 months ago that humans trust uh, bots that are humble. And I'm like,
Hmm.
that means a lot. I mean, because at some level, if a bot comes out to be too arrogant, they're like, yeah, whatever. And then the human is all about proving the bot wrong. But if the
That's
bot actually were to hedge it, like not be as self-righteous, all of a sudden people start to trust the bot a little bit. Like, you know what, I'll give it a chance because
yeah.
every week it's improving. So I'll give it a chance and I'll give it a chance and I'll maybe do help learn some of these things. I mean, because bots also want to learn new things too. So there's a lot of trust building that's also involved between humans and machines that people also underestimate here. But design will play a big role in this. I mean, one of the things even at Nutanix and now at DevRev, um, we definitely celebrate design a lot and think about it a lot and have hired quite a few of them. And it's not an easy problem. What we are solving at DevRev is to get rid of lots of silos of tools, tools that are used for bug tracking by developers and ticket tracking by support people and instant messaging by marketers and product managers. We're trying to bring this together and saying we don't need so many tools. And in any case, you don't want to pay for these things. And if you really want to bring them all together, design will have to play a big role. And you still need to think about personas and workflows and use cases and day in the life of, and obviously a lot of recommendations that need to come up from machines which are about ML models.
It's interesting. I like the way you said it. It's like the AI and design are just two sides of the same coin, and it's almost like left brain, right brain, because one is all more
Hmm.
aesthetic based and creativity based. The other one is actually pure mathematics in most cases, right? And I think it's interesting. It's just almost like you need both sides of that spectrum to make it work, just
Hmm.
like the human brain, right? It's
Absolutely, absolutely.
fascinating. Um, let's talk about DevRev. What is and there is this huge, and I read a couple of articles that you authored and you spoke at and stuff, and the whole notion of developer empowerment, right? So you gave a little bit of an overview on like what you're trying to solve for, but is that a collaboration system or is it more than that? What is the ethos of DevRev, and what are you solving for?
Hmm. Well, the hardest problem we're trying to solve for right now is uh, can we have a system of record that is very product centric and extremely end user aware, because that's where the best companies will flourish, is when they're very aware of the end users activities and engagement or lack thereof, and then what are they really using, which is features and APIs, and what are the buying capabilities, and so on. And of course, there's the flip side to it, which is the dev side, microservices and components and libraries and things like that. So developers today spend a lot of time on the dev parts they're building, and not enough on the rev parts that are being used or not being used and sold and bought and priced and packaged. So I think the goal is that if you put the product at the center or even the user at the center, you'll actually see a lot of these things emerge, that you need to connect the two sides. There's a customer side of it and there's a maker side of it, which is both product manager and the developer side of it. I mean, many entrepreneurs and founders bemoan the fact that their product managers are too internal, they're too
Yeah.
technical, and they don't speak enough with the customer. And so by building a model similar to the way agile model was built, where you had to think about, okay, break it into smaller goals and go
Yeah.
checkpoint these smaller goals, and mitigate risk by taking these smaller steps. I think there's a very similar methodology and thinking that has to emerge around product centricity and end user centricity, and then you have to change the object model around it too. So our system
Mhm.
record, it's tracking work, issues on the developer side and tickets on the customers and customer support side and conversations on the end user side, but they all have to come together and really speak the language of the product and the end user. So we're building that system of record. And now when you build a system record, the question is it only built for the small and medium business, where you go sell them an app and the app cannot change often enough, and It'll only have limited features, cannot be configured, cannot be programmed, cannot be customized. Or you're building the system of record that's highly programmable with a workflow engine, highly
Mm,
customizable object model. So we spend a lot of time doing that so that we're ready for the more complicated customers and discussions. So that's one piece. And the second one is engagement. Like, okay, systems of record have been boring. Nobody wants to go to them. They're slow, they're stodgy, they have too much metadata. It's only built for reporting for managers. Managers hang out, doers don't hang out. How do we make it fun for the doers? Like the way Slack was, unstructured and free flowing, and anybody can create whatever channels they want. So you don't want to lose out on the free flowing nature of it, which is extremely social and grassroots up. But at the
mhm,
same time, as you grow into a serious business, you need structure, you need accountability, you need SLAs and prioritization and attribution and ownership and all those things that need to come through metadata. So I think the thing that we're really trying to balance at DevRev is, can you bring a system of record that's very modern, very product centric, very user centric, so that customers actually become our customers, can become customer centric companies, but at the same time, don't make it a stodgy system of record. Make it a
mm.
very social, grassroots friendly, free flowing system of engagement that happens to have a lot of rich metadata. And who do you go sell this to? I think in the more evolved companies, you go and sell this to customer support people and talk about how they need to be modern and how machine learning needs to help them with a lot of work deflection, case deflection, deduplication, routing stuff, and attributing stuff, and so on. Things that senior customer support people have been very good at because that's their experience they carry in their head about, and they invoke a lot of that experience. I've seen this before. I know who's supposed to work on this,
How to
and
match it.
so on and so forth. A lot of that can actually be done by machines, so that I think customer success can then be a little bit more revenue friendly, renewals friendly, subscription friendly. Worry about, not worrying about sand and transactions and firefighting all the time, but worry about the rocks and pebbles in that relationship. So that's one use case. That's customer success, customer support. And the other one is to the, I would say the burgeoning founder developer who is building a company from scratch, and they want something that in the very beginning is customer centric and product centric. So can we bring something to them? We don't have to actively sell to them and kind of make money out of them, but can we build something with them that as they grow, we also grow with them?
Interesting. No, it's is there a long play in making sure every company doesn't require sales and marketing people and developers can just directly influence revenue? I'm just curious.
No, I mean, this is where I feel like, this, what you just said fails the Maya test. Maya is an acronym that Raymond Loewy came up with, like, about 40 years ago. He's one of the well-known designers who basically created many of these brands in the US, consumer brands. And, so the acronym is most advanced yet acceptable.
Yep.
Most advanced yet acceptable. Uh, Google Glasses failed the Maya test
Yeah.
because you didn't trust if I was wearing a glass that was recording our conversation unbeknownst to you. Um, Google's Plus, with the idea of circles where you could add anybody and there was no notion of a walled garden and privacy and confidentiality, that failed the Maya test. There's so many things that have failed the Maya test. And I think this thing that, hey, product led growth and the idea that you could do so many more things in a PLG fashion will get rid of the product manager or will get rid of the salesperson is probably flawed. Just because, I mean, as I wrote in my last post, the computer and the human are here to stay. And the question is, how can we elevate the lives of the human? How can we elevate the lives of a product manager so that they can actually be paid to think rather than to fight fires all the time? And the same thing is true for salespeople or marketing people,
Sure.
where they can go focus on users who matter. and let the others simmer through the funnel of product-led growth and freemium and all that stuff. So there's a ton of new data and new analytics that will help them elevate their roles to more meaningful campaigns and more meaningful engagement and more meaningful sales opportunities and so on. So I feel like the idea that PLG will get rid of salespeople completely fails the Maya test, because at the end of the day, any meaningful transaction you can call meaningful, 100,000 or a million or 5 million, doesn't really matter. It depends on the scale of at which you operate. Humans want to deal with humans because it's someone else's money. In B2B, you're actually managing someone else's money, and you'll get fired for doing it wrong. And there's a ton of bureaucracy and politics and resource allocation conflicts that happen in a business, that they don't want to be simply at the mercy of a machine selling to them. They want to
Hmm.
know who the person on the other side is. They want to understand Gartner Magic Quadrant. They all want to actually be a little bit more on the defensive when it comes to making these more meaningful decisions. So I think the salesperson is here to stay. The question is, can you make them more meaningfully engaged and probably fight fewer fires?
Oh, it's no, it's it just comes back to the whole promise of something like there's nothing artificial about artificial intelligence, right? It's like I actually wrote a blog back in 2016 or something like AI should be augmented intelligence, right? Because that's where the big opportunity is, because you want to augment the human being to elevate their living condition, right? Whatever be it, right? Is it about take away the mundane so you're actually making them focus on the creative side? Is about
Hmm.
making
Hmm.
them let be less frustrated, like in healthcare, for example. I mean, it's pathetic to see how physicians use their workflow engines and systems today, right? Great opportunity. Just go and say, look, don't worry about search and retrieval, shouldn't be your problem. You should be caring for the patient. There's the aspect of it,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
today medicine is all about triage and finding problems and solving it, rather than the care
Hmm.
aspect of medicine, right? It's a very
Hmm. Hmm.
it's one example, but you're so right. I think and more like a it was more a question from as a taunt to actually try tease that out, if you will, right? I strongly do believe that. I
Hmm.
think do the coexistence of humans and machines is always going to be there. It's going to far, uh,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
going
and
to
look, and
far,
some roles, yeah, I mean, some roles will go away, will disappear. I
and
mean,
it has to,
if you
right?
think, I mean, just think about it, like uh, trading floor on New York Stock Exchange,
It's a museum.
almost gone, right?
Yeah, it's a
Almost gone.
museum.
Now, that's not because of AI as much as it is because of digitization. The fact that
For sure.
people didn't want to really do this physically, and machines were doing it, and now there's so much high frequency trading, and there's a lot of algorithmic trading now that happens.
Yeah.
So many roles will disappear. The question is, how do these folks actually go do bigger, better things? So banking is
Absolutely.
still a large business. Trading is still a large business for Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley. The question is, how do they actually go and make it more meaningful for an impatient user that wants to transact in seconds, not minutes or hours?
No, no, absolutely. I think it's the human history, right? Has shown like when machines automated the factories. I mean, we didn't have the jobs that we have today back in the day. So everybody, there's always going to be a faction of the society. There's going to be some displacement, but the bigger opportunity, the this is not a zero sum game, right? There's a net positive sum
Hmm.
where you're
Hmm.
actually going to create more opportunities and more access
Yeah,
and
yeah, and honestly, think of the stuff that's like I was reading an article maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I'll forward it to you too, as to
Mhm.
why robotic automation in factories has been such a struggle. And the reason is very simple. It's change management. The fact that it is extremely cumbersome to upgrade these robots,
Yeah, yeah.
and it has been faster to retrain humans than
That's
to upgrade these robots. And I'm like, it's fascinating. We live in this dopey world of Silicon Valley where everything has to be done by machines. And then you get to the reality of change management and relearning and upgrade software and all that stuff. And still
It,
humans are faster and they're more elastic than machines, you know.
classic example is just AI, right? In a lot of places where you actually see people, the amount of calories, the time, and the things they're doing to actually use AI to solve a problem, the human walks by, looks at it, and says, "I know exactly what you're talking about." Here's the thing: it's a classic example, right, where you have
Yeah.
to find the right fit, and again. You may do it for other reasons because it doesn't probably bring joy to the human being who's actually doing that job. So that's a great candidate for
Hmm.
saying, let's
Hmm.
automate that, let's make it digital and so forth. But
Absolutely. Absolutely.
interesting, very cool. So, we're in 2022. Businesses, organizations, we're about to potentially enter a recession. I don't know how long it's going to last, but um, what, how, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of action, and we saw how digital transformation across organizations just sped up so much and so forth, right? How can technology be a force multiplier in this moment in history, right now, for if you're an organization? So let me more practically, like, what advice do you have for business leaders and C-suite executives looking at investing in technology today?
Again, a question that probably has a very difficult answer, but let me take a stab at it. I mean, um,
I love open-ended
I
questions,
think,
by the
yeah, no,
way.
it's something that I want to make sure that I don't come out as very prescriptive, and yet, you know, I can provide some suggestions the way I would do it. Um, I think if you look at the people side of things, obviously there's inflation, um, there's going to be a OPEX increase because of inflation as well. And I think one has to think about going and getting talent anywhere and everywhere, you know, and that means, being flexible on other parts of the US as well. You know, what does it mean to go hire people not just in Texas, but also in Florida and in Colorado and wherever else? I think so. We have to be more open to that. It's not a perfect world because people will say when you're really building something from scratch, you need everybody here. So that's where design will need to come in, organizational design. Like, how do you bring people together X number of times a year so that they can still go back and work from wherever they are? I think is a piece that will become the order of the day, given where the demands are for this market. Um, I feel like there is extreme room for consolidation, and that's basically a self-fulfilling thing for me to say. But there's
Mm,
lots of tools, and if anything, SaaS has created a proliferation of companies and tools as well because it's become that much simpler to engineer a product
yeah,
on a
very,
website
very
and in the cloud. So now, how do you really bring them together? I think the chemistry between products is missing. There's still a lot of silos of tools and products.
true.
So there will probably be a need for consolidation, just like there's going to be a consolidation of companies in these coming 3 years. There'll be consolidation of workflows and consolidation of tools as well that'll happen. Sorry, I just dropped my AirPod here.
No
Can you
worries.
hear me now?
Yes, yes, perfect.
Um, I think more and more things are moving to the cloud, and I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that there's a lot of stuff that people are still running on-prem, and I think it's the tyranny of the status quo in some sense. And uh, many of these
Tyrannies.
things, I mean, I go back to my own learning in the last couple of years, and reminds me of *Sapiens*. There was a couple of pages in *Sapiens* that uh, where the author conjectures like the what happened with the discovery of fire, and he talks about a couple of things very interesting. I mean, obviously it's a conjecture, but he says that there were two energy sinks in human body. There is the intestines and there's the brain, and these are the two places that take suck the most amount of energy. And there was this world before fire where the human gut had to be longer because raw meat had to be digested.
Yeah,
And then there's a world after fire, discovery of fire, when cooked meat didn't need as long an intestine. So he's saying that probably the Homo sapiens, the intestine shrunk as part of the evolution of this. And then more of the energy started going to the brain. So they could actually do more intelligent things. And that's why we became the most intelligent species. Maybe it has to do with fire. And I really love that metaphor, because I feel like when we started building this in the cloud, what we've done in a matter of year and a half, probably would have taken 3 to 4 years on prem. So developers are actually having to eat cooked meat rather than raw meat, And
Yeah.
for many of the things, I mean, we use MongoDB, we use Elasticsearch, we use Redis, we use DynamoDB, we use Kubernetes, we use a lot of these technologies,
Yeah.
but we don't carry the pager. We forget about hosting it, but we don't even carry the pager for these things. And that doesn't mean that it's inexpensive, but in terms of the way where consumption is moving, at the very least, when you have to build something from scratch, you can do a lot of these things without really having to commit to something big and worth
Right.
hundreds of thousands of dollars and so on. So I think to the
Right.
technology leaders out there, I would recommend they actually look at this new way of, OpEx way of consuming rather than CapEx way of consuming as well. And again, it's cliche to say this, but there's a lot that machines will do going forward, but it has to be applied. It has to be through an application, and there's tons of applications that are out there these days about people's performance and HR and front office use cases and mid office use cases and back office use cases. So they should all look at modern ways of not just storing information, which basically we all did in the last 30 years. We digitized paper onto machine records, but now to really go and say, oh, how do we get to the next level of engagement and intelligence and records will require modernizing a lot of this stuff. Because, I mean, you could argue, like, why would they touch it? Because in a world of recession, they shouldn't have to. But I feel like the maximum innovation actually happens in the next 3 years, where new technologies, new products will come out, and the pent up demand will speak. You look at the early 1990s, you look at 2003 and beyond, you look at 2010 and beyond, and you realize how so much innovation actually happened in those years, which basically was waiting for demand, and demand came, and purse strings opened up, and very
Yeah.
large companies are formed. So I feel like the real lesson for the technology leaders is keep an eye on what's really being innovated upon, because in the next couple of years, as you get more confident about spend, you'll need to start to go and invest in some of these new things as well.
That is awesome. And the last thing that you just said also, given these kind of downturns or recessions also cause that, it also creates a constrained system, which is actually really good for innovation in
You're
general
right.
as an ecosystem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the constraints are never a bad thing. I mean, necessity mothers invention. I mean, we raised upwards 60 to $65 million in a seed round, and probably Silicon Valley history's largest seed round. But we are still acting like we're a very small company, and we've only raised 10 million as opposed to 65 million. And that those
That's amazing.
constraints help, because um, there's a really good podcast. Speaking of podcasts, by Brene Brown. Excuse me. It's she goes through the book Stretch, and she talks about stretchy versus chasey. And I think now is the
Right.
time to stretch, as opposed to chase. And the time to chase will come, but it's probably 2 years out.
That's awesome. Awesome. Very good. I want to, explore one more topic, and topic of entrepreneurship and leadership in these turbulent times, right? And it's probably has to do with the initial part of the conversation we talked about, that Zen, the whole notion of how do we actually just control the things that we can control, or focus on the things we can control and stuff. What's your advice to, and it's the flip side of the same question, but advice to entrepreneurs and leaders out there who are managing these turbulent times, right? With, founders like myself, yourself, folks who are thinking of entrepreneurship right now. Give me somewhat prescriptive guidance for them, if you will.
Mhm. Well, I say you can have a war within your mind of all the self doubts and what's not going to work. But what always helps you is when you talk to customers, because then opportunities arise, and you're like, oh wow, they are actually looking at that very delightfully. So so the more time entrepreneurs and founders and leaders spend with customers, the better it is for everybody. Because then
Not the
you're not
VCs,
fighting within.
customers.
Say that again.
Not the VCs, but the customers.
Customers,
Not the VCs.
because
Yeah.
that's, yeah, you're right. I mean, of course, you need money as well, so do whatever it takes to raise capital. But get the dopamine, the endorphin, the oxytocin, the serotonin. Get the EDSO, as Mike Simon Sinek talks about it, from customers. Talking to customers, and even hiring people. When I look at employees as customers too, and how do you really spend time with them, and get to understand them, so that they also have a bigger sense of belongingness and ownership of the company, as opposed to just being a cog in the wheel. It's really, really important. um, so get the dopamine and the endorphins from talking to these customers. um, I think breathing is very helpful. One of the things that has helped me as an entrepreneur. Just one moment. It's my 8-year old. Just one moment.
Sure, sure, sure. It's all
Sorry
good.
about that.
No, we
Uh,
it's awesome.
no,
It's
I
it's an
think it's just
example of
life.
how
Yeah, it's
hybrid
just life. Yeah,
truly life is, right?
right.
I mean, it's not
Absolutely.
work or home anymore. Go ahead. Sorry.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right. Um, the second thing is, I mean, breathing. I think there's tons of naysayers you'll have along the way. People who laugh at you. The fence sitters who actually feel like, I'm still going to wait for other fence sitters or other believers, and then finally the believers. And I think somebody, I don't know, probably 30, 40 years ago, talked about the bell curve of adoption of any new product, and that's a rite
Yep.
of passage. And I think everybody should normalize that you will have to deal with a ton of late majority and laggards who are being paid
More.
to
Yeah.
not take risks. They'll not take risks, until this product really has gone through the hump of the bell in some sense. So deal with the innovators and the early majority folks, the early adopters. Find them. There has to be a way to qualify them, and know how they do what they do, why are they the rebels in their organizations, and so on. I think it's really important to normalize that, because the world is not just built for one kind. It's built for a whole bell curve of distribution of folks who take risks and folks who don't take risks. And finally, conserve cash. I think it's trying to be stretchy, and whatever it takes to stretch the dollar, it's the right thing to do right now.
Awesome. Dheeraj, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending the time. Can I ask you one last question? More, probably a little personal question.
Mhm.
What's your morning routine like? Just give me your morning routine if you have one. I mean,
Yeah, I think work begins early for me now these days. And when work ends late for me, I sleep a little longer. I make sure that I do sleep well, at least 7 hours, and I try to. These days, I'm actually doing yoga late in the night so that I can sleep better. And
that's a good
at
hack. Actually,
at
I
very
agree.
low
Yeah.
temperature, I think I've been told it has to be 67, 68 Fahrenheit. So I'm doing some of those things. When I wake up, I'll be honest, I've not been disciplined enough to not touch my phone, so I do touch my phone.
Of course.
And then I have a really good coffee machine in which I've started to make my own oat milk cappuccino, and I'm trying out new things in the coffee machine, and then saying good morning and love you to the kids and my wife, and basically start with that. And then, of course, I'm a sucker for news, and I need to get to news. I need to get to the stock market and look at how things are. But I think that's how my day starts, and then of course meetings and customers and all that comes relatively quickly.
Do, do you meditate regularly?
I do yoga, and I used to do it with a
Right.
trainer, with a teacher, and I continue to do that. But also these days, I'm trying to do it on my own, because I feel
Sure.
like stress also brings. I mean, I am going to turn 47 this August, and now I need to also worry about how to age gracefully, and you can see the
Yeah.
body parts that actually are beginning to make a little bit of a squeaky sound and so on. So you got to take care of things a little bit as well, and eat
That's
well, and
so
of course, as I said, breathe and sleep well.
That is awesome. Dheeraj, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending the time. Where can the viewers and listeners find you on the internet? Other than in news, of course.
On Twitter at Dheeraj, Dheeraj, and
Okay.
also on LinkedIn, I'm equally accessible. I respond to everybody, and I'm a sucker for hearing from people. As long as people are constructive and positive and authentic, I'd love to respond to them.
That's amazing. Dheeraj, thanks so much. Such a blast conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.